Welcome to Marriage Now What? So today we have Ashleigh. Ashleigh, after our last conversation, it was kind of about parenting and how us as parents should view the beliefs that we have and how we're projecting those beliefs onto our kids. And by the end of it, we kind of realized that we both have been the result of parents pushing their beliefs on us. And so in so many ways we could say we've been victimized by that. And it wasn't the intention of why we did the podcast is to kind of throw our parents under the bus. But it just kind of turned into a real experience of, wow, we've been through the pressures of trying to sustain their beliefs or their thoughts and living our lives towards that. I know for me, I had a challenging situation with my mom just a couple months ago. I did a podcast on No Church, and she listened to the podcast and she's like, no, this is what we believe, or this is what the Bible says. And it was a lot of things that you would hear on a Sunday morning at a church, and I started to present to her the reasons why I said the things that I said, the things that I've seen in the Bible in a new light, different light, with grace, and how Jesus reacted to people does not seem to be the Jesus that's preached at the pulpits on Sunday mornings. The pulpits, Jesus is a harsh, judger. If you don't do everything he wants, you're going to go to hell. The Jesus I see walking in the streets of Jerusalem, touching people, healing them, loving them, caring for them, freeing them, redeeming them, is portrayed totally different to me through the lens of grace and love. And so what I appreciated about that is my mother started to demand her beliefs to me, but she gave me the courtesy of letting me talk. And after we were able to talk, she then did not say, I fully believe 100% what you believe. I'm going to change my ways to your ways. But the concept that came up is, I love you and will give you the grace to believe that and give me the grace to believe where I'm at. And I kind of feel like, this conversation's gone two ways. It's one, our responsibility as parents. What kind of pressure are we putting on kids to live up to the beliefs that we feel they should, adhere to? Customs, traditions, things that we feel are satisfying to God, satisfying to teachers, spouses. We have all these thoughts of what we should do, and that's good for us. And we think since that thought is good for us, then now it should be good for our kids. But what if it was a traumatic situation when you were a kid that, there was some sexual stuff that went on as a kid and you're like, ooh, I don't want that sexual stuff to happen to my kids. So you protect them and you put all these beliefs on them, don't sleep over people's house, don't trust people, don't do this, don't do that. And now you're turning this whole bad experience into pressure for them to live up to stay away from that, or, same with God. It's like, well, God will only accept you if you do X, Y, Z, then A, B, C, and then come back to X, Y, Z and finish and make sure you're doing that. And then go back to A, B, C. And by the whole time you have to have the whole Bible prayed. And, all of these expectations that we put on our kids. But with the conversation, we realized quickly that we've had expectations put on us. And I think it's kind of hard to, now that we're adults and have kids and are teaching our kids, how do we understand or process what we've been through? And do we want to implement that same thing to our kids? Was it good, the beliefs that were put on us? Did we grow out of that? Did we mature? Did we become a better person? Or did it hurt us? And is it still hurting us? And are we still dealing with things? And how do we process and deal with those things? So I know for me, I've kind of had this struggle. And I don't necessarily know that it's beliefs that are put on you from your parent, but also experiences. So my parents were divorced, and which were my people, and I used to say things, and I thought it was weird. I was like, oh, I'm a product of divorce, and then I'm like, man, if my parents stayed together or if my dad stayed together. And then like my dad was quirky, I mean, like I'd see him sometimes, and then like for months or years, I wouldn't see him at all. And it was just, I felt like I always went to him. I lived with my mom, so I would always call him, go to his house when I got older and stuff like that. And I felt very one-sided on the relationship, almost to the point of I don't even know if I'm loved or received because I've got to do all of the work. And I remember even just, it was 6 or 7 years ago at my son's birthday party. We had a big event, and he came up, and I think Sam was 6 or 7 years old. And we got to talking, and I told him I bought a timeshare. Now, he's got a couple timeshares, and I guess he wanted me to buy his timeshare or something like that, but he never really like kind of emphasized and I'm not promoting timeshares. It just kind of worked for us. Me and my wife, we bought one, a package deal, and it had some different things in it, and those different things I wanted more than what his timeshare would have offered. And he left that day. And I called him the next day. I said, hey, let's go eat breakfast. Let's do this. Let's go to, art store or something like that. And he's like, no, I'm going to just take off. I was like, all right. And that was the last time I talked to him for 6 years. Now, it wasn't on purpose really on my part. You just kind of get busy and stuff like that. But he never called me. I never called him. And it like kind of caught up to me like a couple years later. It's like the kids are saying, well, where's Grandpa? And I'm like, oh, that's... I don't know. Maybe I should call him. And then it kind of, you turn that into anger, like, well, where is Grandpa? Well, why hasn't Grandpa called? Why hasn't he written or sent presents or, things like that? And so, what I was having to go through was his beliefs of how he was acting or not acting. And I had to process that, and one of the things that finally kind of helped me through this process of, am I doing something wrong? Am I doing something right? Is it not that he loves me or cares for me or all of these things? I had to think about, all right, well, him and his dad, they didn't talk. His dad rejected him. His dad was a fire chief in Fort Lauderdale. My dad was a fire chief, but got kicked off from the fire department, some drama there. So it's kind of like, you embarrassing. We were Irish, so he's embarrassing, the father doing the work and stuff like that. And so his example of a dad was hands off. They didn't have a relationship. I went to my grandpa's house and saw him just about a month before he passed. But I know my dad probably didn't see his dad for 10 years before he passed. And so maybe that was normal for him, not to see your dad, not to see your son, or, so maybe this process into him is what dads do or don't do. I don't know. So I kind of give him that thought, well, this is the best that he has to work with, with his mental capability or understanding or emotional, support. So for me, that was kind of the first thing where I was saying, all right, maybe it's not me, maybe it's not that he doesn't love me or doesn't value me or things like that. Maybe it's just him processing communication. Maybe he's, deep thinker, analytical and quiet or hermit or this or that, or there's a world of reasons why parents we do the things that we do, but I don't think we understand all the time the calculation of what is the end result. So, that's my first step is, all right, he's doing the best that he has. So I give him all that credit. And then the next thing that was kind of the catch for me is, and I use this a lot, I says, I give you the grace to be you, give me the grace to be me. So if your understanding of belief is Republican, great. If my understanding of political reasoning is to be a Democrat, I'll give you the grace to be a Republican, you give me the grace to be a Democrat. or vice versa, however that looks. If it's about hell, or if it's about money, or if it's about whatever the situation is, I feel that grace equals love, or love equals grace. So if I can say to that person, I love you enough, regardless of how you believe, and I'm going to give you the grace to believe that, but then I'm also an individual and a person who's important in this situation also. So my beliefs is that I'm valuable enough. I don't need to put myself in this torment of always feeling like I have to call you all the time, or, make it right, or change my ways. A lot of people who are gay probably feel like they have to stop being gay so that their parents will accept them, and their parents feel like they have to stop being gay so God will accept them. And, so I can see the battle, but when at a point can we as parents, individuals, human beings on both sides of this thing say, I give you the grace to be gay, give me the grace to have my understanding also, and I'm going to work on my understanding if you work on your understanding, and still love each other. I think that's the thing is where can we still find love? Talking with Philo Drysdale, he says there's so many different views of hell, and really there's so many different views of marriage, and there's so many different views of raising kids, and there's so many different views of biblical things. I mean, just think about how many different churches are out there or things like that. So who's right? Who's wrong? To me, everybody's wrong. Or is everybody right? Now I threw out that is everybody wrong because basically that's what we deem as people. If you don't think exactly like me on every subject, then you're wrong. So that means everybody's wrong. But what makes us the head chief on thought? What makes us the head chief on belief? This is, what declares us as the master and ruler over all information. And then the demand that everybody live by the information that we live by. Like, I never even remember anywhere in the Bible that would say something like that, right? I mean, is there a scripture? Make everybody believe the way that you believe. Make everybody act the way that you want them to act. Make everybody live their life unto you.
Well, I'm going to interject finally. I think we run into that because, in Ephesians where it talks about husbands and wives and children, most churches emphasize that the husband's the head of the household. And they take it so far as to say that he's over his wife, he's over his children, and they'll put out these assumptions that he's the ultimate say. And so that's probably how we've created a lot of this environment and culture of, one, men are in charge and know better, and two, that's who rules the house, and that's who our beliefs come from. That's what I personally think. That's where I think a lot of this has been interjected between the disconnect with parents and children, that, and also just the absence of fathers in the home and not having that healthy relationship demonstrated to be passed down. Because just like you said, your dad did not have a great relationship with his dad. And so that passed down to your dad. But it stopped with you. You recognized it. And you've not allowed that to continue. I'm not saying generational curses or anything like that, but sometimes when we have a good representation of an area in our life, we're going to attach to it and pour that into our children too, just like with our revelation of grace. We have a great representation of Jesus and of God and his love for us. So we're going to pass that down to our kids. But we also give them the freedom to come and to question and to ask and have conversation with us about it. But I do believe a lot of it probably has to do with the culture that's been formed by religious beliefs.
Well, and if we are basically saying, we would have to say that we come from the evangelical belief system. So, the things that we're even talking about today are really firmly founded in that, so if you're a Muslim, you're probably thinking differently, well, that's not how we think, or that's not what we believe. And for me, the thing about grace is it goes on both sides. It goes to the ones under us and it goes to the ones over us. It basically is for us, but it's really for everything around us. I think that was one of the greatest things that I enjoyed about Christianity is grace, right? I was a druggie, had lots of bad relationships. And so here I am, and I learned that God has grace for me as an individual. And that was great. But when I started to be honest, meaner to other people, more demanding to other people, is when I lost that view of that great grace for me, and then I started putting on myself pressure. Got to be a better dad, got to be a better husband, got to be a better business person, got to be a better Christian, got to be better, got to be better, got to be better. And my view turned into everything about me having to be better, and then I demanded everybody else have to be better. My dad has to be a better person because basically he's not stepping up, he's missing the mark, he's not calling me, he's not doing what he should do. My kids is, my wife is, everybody around me is not doing what they're supposed to be doing because my view is I need to be better. Mm-hmm. But when I have the view of grace, then I can have the view of, oh, my dad, he needs grace. That boy, he needs some love and some grace. My kids need some love and my grace. My people at work need love and grace. My people, I can view a different way. There's this kind of concept, basically, it's a victim and responsibility. And a lot of times, if I were to say a story right now and I'd say, that thing about my dad, well, my dad left and I can't believe he didn't call me back. And I say all this drama of how it made me feel, how my kids feel. And I give you all this bad view of that situation. And that's the victim in me. Mm-hmm. But then if I come back and I says, man, my dad left the party. I asked him to go out. He didn't say anything. And so I called him and I called him and I called him. And I wrote letters, and I kept on going, and I kept on saying, I love you. Then, now it changed that whole story, and finally I got a hold of him, and I told him, hey, look, I was sorry I did that. I thought it was a good idea when I did it. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it offended you. Maybe it hurt you. I'm sorry. But I thought it was the best thing for me to do. And I think that's what happens a lot of times is we don't find closure because we like that, hey, you should have done this. Because we put so much pressure on us to make changes all the time that we're viewing other people and saying, you should change. And what if we could change? Now, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that we should take on the responsibility of our parents. I think we should be willing to accept their wrongs and flaws, willing to accept the damage that they did to us, but we are not that damage. We are who we think we are. Let me just say this. Why does things that people say hurt us so much? Because we think it's true. But is it really true? If we have a better mind of who we are in grace and love and honor of what God's done for us, then the things that people say about us are not as hurtful. So as long as we feel that they have, like, our parents are the ones who are declaring our value, which they're not, then it's harder for us to let that go. It's harder for us to say, I give you the grace because you really, really hurt me. I give you the grace because this has tormented me, or I never felt I could achieve, or I could never be good enough. And I think that's kind of the thing is not to do it to make them better or educated or change, but really to make us better, right? This whole thing is about us. I don't ever feel like you can really change anybody's beliefs. And that's a hard thing to think about, you know. I know sometimes I'll talk to somebody on a job site and I'll say, hey, do it this way. And I'll come back and they do it the same way that they've always been doing it. I'm like, well, didn't we talk about that? Didn't I show you? Didn't I tell you? And they're like, yeah, but I'm just so familiar with this. And when can we allow the familiar, even if it's bad, when can we allow the bad things that people have done because it was familiar go? You know, is it ours that we have to hold on to for the rest of our life? Or are we valuable enough to say that was a moment in time, but that's not who I am? That was a moment in time, but no longer do I let it dictate my life, but I give it grace. And I think once you give it grace, that's where basically you find the freedom from it. You know, as long as I'm harping on the fact that, oh man, my dad hasn't called me again. It's been another year. And I wonder if he's, and actually I called him at Christmas time, and then I called him again on his birthday, and I haven't called him since. And 100%, I do not believe he'll call me. I think it could be another 6 or 7 years and he won't call me. But I'm okay with it. You know, like, I am not going to overdo it. I'll make it available. I'll give him the grace. But, like, I'm not going to change my beliefs. You know, because, like, people will say in the Bible, they'll say, oh, well, you got to honor your mother and father. I honor my father by giving him the grace to do what he thinks is right, or do what he thinks is good for this relationship, or do you okay, if I put on pressure of my dad and say, man, Dad, you need to call me every week and tell me how you're doing. What did I do? I just put my belief system on him of how he should be a dad to me. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of hard, because then at that point, I'm putting pressure on him, and I don't like the pressure that he's putting on me of feeling like I have to call. You know, it's kind of this double-edged sword of, which one's right? Well, it's right that he should call me. Well, and then other people would say, well, it's right that you should call him. And I think that's where we need to find the balance out as people, individuals, ourselves. I think it's okay not to call him.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also one thing that I think we need to keep in mind is he's probably doing the best that he can. Maybe the best that he can do is to pick up the phone whenever you call, because he carries guilt and shame because things didn't turn out how he probably thought they would turn out, you know? Maybe that's the best he can do. And so, you don't know. Maybe he looks forward to those calls every few months, and he's like, Ben's calling, I can pick up the phone. But the best that he can do isn't picking up the phone and calling you.
Right.
And that's okay, because that's where you give the grace. Give
the grace. I like that. You know, that's when you read the love chapter, basically, you know, and it says love is patient, love is kind, love is. I think sometimes it's kind of hard, because would I declare love for my dad? It's kind of hard, because I'm not in a relationship with the guy for 6, 7, 8 years, you know? So it's kind of like, how do I say I love that person? Mm-hmm. I don't know that I can. I'm not saying I can't, but, you know, it's pretty hard to, over that time, truly say, you know, like, I'm with my kids all the time. I mean, yeah, I love my kids. Oh man, I love my wife. So, but I'm with them. I was just with them 2 hours ago, you know? So, I mean, that's easier. I think the separation of time with parents or whoever, that it makes it harder to use that word. So, and I was thinking about that scripture, and I thought, man, you know, love and grace are interchangeable, mm-hmm. you know? And I said, well, what would that read be if it was, you know, grace is patient, grace is everlasting, grace is, you know, I can agree with that. Like, I can say my grace for my dad is everlasting, mm-hmm. you know, and I'm not trying to get weird. It's just sometimes it it disconnects saying I love this person after so much trauma. But I do. But it might be hard. So, what does that look like for you? Does that look like the same thing? I mean, should you start saying, I have grace for this person, and interchange that word from grace to love? I really think the two are interchangeable and mean kind of the same thing. I think it just kind of gives a face to love. I think like love, we're like, we got to write little hearts and, you're the greatest and stuff like that. But what does it look like to have grace for an individual instead of quote unquote love?
Well, I'm going to go off on a rabbit trail. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, rabbit away.
With you bringing that up, one of the most beautiful revelations that I've ever heard about that passage in the Bible is God is love, and we're in God, and God is in us, and therefore that's our true identity. So while you're saying grace is this, you're saying it as an action of you giving out grace. But like you were referring to how we take on our parents' beliefs of who we are and how we need to let that go, that's probably one of the most empowering ways we can do that, is to realize I am patient, I am kind, I keep no records of wrongs. Like, if we're going to challenge ourselves in any area in our relationships, especially the relationships that have brought us so much damage and hurt and trauma, it would be to live out of our true identity, which is exactly that, which is the love verse in Corinthians, which is our truest identity. It was why we were created. So you are patient with your dad. You are kind with your dad. You don't keep any records of wrong with your dad. It's beautiful. It's humbling. You are enough. You're steadfast. And that's how we're supposed to be. It is easier said than done, because sometimes we just have to process all that has happened to us, because the trauma is real. It doesn't matter if I tell you, Ben, my dad stepped on my toe when I was 5 years old and he didn't apologize. That was a traumatic experience for me, even though to you, he's like, oh, it's probably an accident. You know what I mean? Every person's trauma is real to them. And there is a process to being able to bring that to the surface and to let it go. But I think, especially for us that are trying to do good with parenting, like I'm investing my entire life into my kids because I just love them so, so much. We want to know our truest self so we can pour that into them instead of what we've been given. Can I check this by my truest identity? Am I being kind right now? And I do that sometimes. Like if I just react to my kids, I'm like, okay, that wasn't a moment of being patient or being kind. Am I holding that wrong over them in this moment? Can I let it go? We also have to give ourselves grace in those moments. But I think when we know our truest identity and we can go back and remind ourselves of it, that's when we're going to be pouring out the most love and the most grace, is to realize it doesn't matter if he picks up the phone or not. I'm still love. I'm still patient. I'm still kind.
Well, it's interesting that you said something, and I think we should recognize these things. Like you said, if you say something to your kids, you're then like, ooh, was that too harsh? Ooh, was that the right thing? Ooh, did I do what was good for them? And I think we need to recognize that about our own parents, our own situations. How many times have they also felt the hurt without apologizing for it? Has you've probably been damaged by something that your parents have said or reacted or something like that, and you don't know that there's a possibility that it eats them up inside. There might be something eating up my dad inside. Maybe it is because of his dad. Maybe it is because he got a divorce. Maybe it is because he feels like he's not good enough qualified dad to be dad, or so maybe he's working through drama. And that's why I say, is he doing the best that he can? Now, again, how much of my life do I have to apply to pulling them, okay, come on, be a better dad. Okay, come on, or is it okay for me to live my life with my kids, and when he's ready, be ready. When he's not ready, be ready not to be ready. There's kind of a two-part scenario on that, and I think it's okay to say, there's kind of a saying out there, you do you, I'll do me. I'll give you the grace, you give me the grace. Give me the grace that I don't have to call you all the time to baby you, to pull you along, or, constantly say, forgive me, or I forgive you. Or I think that's just a whole lot of drama, and as long as you're having to reapply drama of forgiveness and what about this, and let's talk about that again, and let's do this again, and are you still upset that I'm gay? What if they can not believe in being gay, but they can believe in loving you? I think that's the mark for me today is, when can we put aside our beliefs on both sides? Our beliefs to the people above us and our beliefs to the kids below us. Put our beliefs aside and love our parents with grace and love our kids with grace. My kids are still young, so I don't want to feel like I've achieved all things. And I know what they're going to go through. And I know that there's going to be some situations, and I'm going to be like, well, that was wrong. And, but will I give enough grace to, instead of saying that was wrong in the view of me, in the view of my beliefs, that was wrong? Because here's the thing you got to think about. If a kid does something, his belief was, that's right. So same with our parents. If our parents did something, their belief was, that was right. When will we give people the ability to say, I believe you believe that was right, but for me personally, it was really wrong. It was really damaging. You didn't calculate this thing correctly. I will give you the grace that you believe that was right, and it's okay. But I do not want to take that belief on, Yeah. And how can you live still on this earth with that person?
A few years ago, I was going through some stuff with my parents, and I was just questioning a lot, and I was talking to the Lord, and I was like, oh, God, why does it have to be like this? Why do I have all these questions? Like, why did this stuff happen to me? Why did this response, or did I get this response this certain way? And I felt like the Holy Spirit said, Ashleigh, can you love them without ever getting the answers to your questions? And I was like, oh, my gosh. Like, it just took the breath out of me. And I was like, of course I can. Because they're my parents and I love them. Of course I can still love them if I don't ever get the answer to those questions. And he's like, well, then can you accept what they can give? And I'm sitting here like, but they need to be given so much more. Like, I deserve so much more. But that wasn't what he asked. It was like, can you accept what they can give? And I can't say that I answered that one right away. That one took a little meditating on, and then I was like, I can accept that. I can go into this knowing that whatever they can bring to the table is a gift, and take it for what it is. And let the rest go. And I'm not saying I don't still have stuff I have to deal with now, because I do. I mean, it's hard, not having the picture that you always thought you would have of relationship after you've grown up and had your own kids and getting to do life with them. But I think if we can just accept that what they do bring to the table is actually a gift, even if it isn't exactly what we want to feast on, then we can appreciate them at a whole nother level. We can give them grace unconditionally.
If we were to dissect this, I would bet that most of the time there's a wedge in between the relationship because of one thought or one belief. Like if you were to write a list of top 20 things about your parents, and I bet you could do it. The 20 good things about your parents. You'd be like, man, they did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. And then, yeah, you could probably write a 20 list on what they've done wrong. But my point is that your parents aren't all good. They're not all bad. Mm-hmm. My dad's not all good. He's not all bad. All of our relationships are not all good, all bad. And I think that's the same thing as parents with kids. Is the one thing that our kid does going to drive a wedge and change and make me think he's 100% bad? Well, do we think our parents are 100% bad? Or is there just one thing that's just so intolerable, And that's what I think we should value is connect with people where you can connect with, connect in what you think's good about people. Sigh deeply when you have to deal with the bad, because really I'm not 100% with my wife. I'm not 100% with my kids. I'm not 100% with anybody, even my bestest of friends. Mm-hmm. I say things or they do things or, we're not 100% with really anybody but God. And I think that's the interesting thing about this. If we look at humanity and mankind, God loves everybody culturally, age, demographics, financially, spiritually. So why is it that God can love all, but we can only love the ones that are closest to the 100% of how we believe? Like, I don't remember anywhere in the Bible as, only love the ones that believe 100% like you. Because I don't think that's a possibility, because there is nobody who believes 100% like you. What does it say? You'll know my disciples by the love they have for one another, regardless if they think like you, act like you, treat you. And now when I say love, obviously if you were raped, don't put yourself back in that situation. There's common sense. And that's why I say, I give you the grace. You are a horrible person, did a horrible thing. Give me the grace to never talk to you again. I think that's a real thing that we need to view and say, physically and mentally and verbally. There's a lot of abuse that goes on. And I want people to be able to feel good about their clarity of, oh no, never, ever, ever, ever again. But at least say, I give you the grace to stay away from me. I give you the grace to never call me again. And then what does that look like for us? I do think that walls are okay. That's just me. I don't feel like we should have to be mentally tormented, physically tormented over and over and over, and then say, oh, well, that's love or that's grace. I definitely don't.
Yeah, I agree on that one. I think we still have to protect ourselves, and a lot of times giving grace is one form of protecting ourselves, for sure.
So in closing remarks about relationships, teaching, beliefs, connecting with people?
No, just choose to love, pretty much. Realize people are doing the best that they can. And I'm just going to put a plug in here. There's a podcast by Russell Brand and Brene Brown that really breaks that down, that helps you understand just how fundamental it is to be able to accept people and realize that they're doing the best that they can, even if you don't think it's the best that they can.
I know. And for me, sometimes I think about that for my kids, like when they go in the room and they're playing on their phone or doing this or doing that. Am I doing the best that I can to love them? Mm-hmm. Am I presenting my life in the exact way that they would need me, not in the way that I would want to be? And as a parent, that's kind of, we kind of do this, accept me as I am, Mm-hmm. I'm the parent, you're the child. But what if we could say the value of the child is that we change to make the connection, not that we demand that the child change to make the connection?
For sure.
If I look at Sam life experience versus my life experience, why am I demanding that Sam change to match my life experience of understanding beliefs than rather meeting him where he's at? He's got 12 years of experiences and beliefs. I've got 45. Why am I demanding that my life matters more than his life? And I think that's, how are we handling our kids? Are we handling them in such a way of, do this? Well, why? And kids love to ask questions. And, sometimes as parents, we don't like to be challenged. It's just, well, do what I said. Oh, dang it. Or we'll use God. God wants you to, and he'll be disappointed. I've said it like this. I mean, it's great that you can be able to beat the crap out of your kid and then blame God for it. Well, God told me not to, what is it? He's just,
spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah, right. So now God's given me permission to beat the crap out of my kid with a rod because he demands that we do these things. But, again, back to Jesus. I didn't see Jesus spanking a bunch of people.
Right.
But I saw him conversating and talking to people where they were at. The woman caught in adultery, Jesus did not get up, grab a rock, and handle it and be like, what, woman? What? Huh? Mm-hmm. You want to be judged? He stayed on the ground where she was at. So he physically prostrated his body into the same likeness of her when everybody else was standing over her saying, you need to live your life this way. You need to do this or we're going to kill you. Or you did this and now we're going to kill you because you're worthless, no good, piece of crap. And I think sometimes as parents, we have to realize our own posture is we're bigger. Our voices are louder, deeper. And sometimes we're not as forgiving, and we're those Sadducees and Pharisees holding rocks over our kids saying, you piece of crap. You're not doing what I told you to do. And us as parents are not living the way that we should, giving that kid that grace. So why can't we yield our beliefs and take a new view, even if it's on our knees next to our kids?
It's good, Ben.
Until next time.